All right, being recorded. Let me click OK.
Yeah, there's your favorite voice back again. Um, sorry,
Speaking speaking of favorite voice, something that I've heard in the last week or two that at first it kind of puzzled me because the first time or two I heard it, I thought, and it's just someone trying to make me feel good, blowing smoke up my ass. But the more that you start to hear it, you start to believe it. That I'll I've been told here in the last couple of weeks by more than one person of, that you have like a broadcasting voice or, uh, there's a couple of 12-step meetings that I go to that when I speak, there's a microphone.
mhm.
And while I'm reading, if I speak from that microphone afterwards, there's a guy came up the other night and hugged me after. He goes, "Man, you got a great voice. You could sing like Trace Atkins." I said, "That country dude?" He goes, "Yeah." I said, "Well, thank you. I'm flattered." But and then Friday, which was yesterday, a gal in one of my groups that I went up and read a chapter out of a book in front of the class, and afterwards, she said, "You have a beautiful voice." I said, "Well, thank you." Wow, chicka, wow, wow.
Well,
But anyway, so yeah.
interestingly, in that regard, interestingly, when I was just with ACBL, so AEP, then we were required. Um, I did, I want to say 6 months dispatching dockside and Harahan fleets at night,
Oh yeah.
seven on, seven off. But then after that, I jumped to our Tiger Fleet dispatch. Well, we had a radio on the desk there in Convent that would reach out to the fleet boats at Tiger. They started calling me DJ Dispatch. So I've had a radio voice for quite a while.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
was,
which I guess it is a flattering comment, but I never really had thought of it in that way. Um, I remember Captain Charlie Ritchie, he's passed away now, but he got on the boat one time and we were going down the river and doing watch change. And he said, "Man, you're just what they look for in Hollywood and on the news channels." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Because you have no accent. You're what they want because you show no bias either way in your accent, the way that you speak." Whatever. I don't know what he meant by that, but I don't watch a lot of news, but maybe he's right. I don't know. I don't know. Hey man, you told me to remind you about Friday. What happened
yeah,
Friday?
no, very little. I was off work Friday and I'll be off work Monday. Just had some time to kind of gather my thoughts and refocus on the podcast. Wanted to talk to you about some things. I got some feedback actually that the longer form content, like especially with you, the 3 hour visit we had before we recorded with David,
Right.
I published that last week and it's already gotten over 50 hours of view time. Um,
Is that good?
it's pretty promising on my channel, yeah.
Oh, well, good.
Now, I don't have a huge following, but just a 3 hour production generating over 50 hours in a week is, I think that's a pretty good measure. I'm not
Oh, okay. 50 hours in 1 week. I got
right.
you.
Or, so far I just published it last Tuesday. But some feedback I've gotten, and I'll fill you in on the Friday stuff.
Hey,
Um,
Tim, by the way, before we go, Steve just came out here.
okay.
What's
And
up, Tim?
Good morning, sir. How we doing?
Good. How are you doing today?
Doing just fine. Can I introduce you to the audience that may see
Yeah.
this?
Yes,
All
please. Go
right. Well,
ahead.
actually, I'll tell you what, Charlie, you introduce him to the audience that may see this.
Introduce
oh,
me.
okay, well, this is Stephen J. Ledbetter from Knoxville, Tennessee.
But
Yeah, I've always heard it's wise to avoid in polite conversation
right.
at work. Um, but that does get me back to you, Charlie. We caught up a little bit on the phone. Did you want to discuss kind of what's been going on with you?
Yeah, yeah.
You want me to leave you guys?
No, no, man, that's up to you. I mean, I'll just go ahead and point it this way. But yeah, you're welcome to come
Yeah,
and
I'll get
go
some
as you want,
water.
buddy. You won't bother me. Yeah, Steve and I were. I guess you'd say that he's about my closest person at this point because I haven't seen my son since I moved here. It's been 3 months, and I have seen his mother twice. We went out to breakfast, Stacy, his mom. But um, when now at this point, I guess the things on my mind kind of, I'm not supposed to future trip, so to speak, as they say. You can't look too far into the future, and you can't live in the past. You're supposed to be in the now. However, I mean, I think all of us know in society that, as a man or as a person, there's certain things you have to plan forward to in order to make it in life. And I say that because I used to always have goals, whether that be, say saving money to take my son to Ireland 10 years ago when I did, saving up to buy a new vehicle. I mean, these are goals that anyone I think usually has in life that I don't find myself anymore having goals, really, so to speak. And when I think of that, I think, what is it that I've been doing lately to try to better myself? And part of that has been this journey with the VA, which at this point um, is going about as good as it can with the Veterans Administration. I am getting health care now. I'm being treated instead of what I call mistreated. Um, I'm not playing the victim on that. I think that and most listeners probably know about what happened last July 3rd to July the 8th. And since then, the turn of events that have happened that I'm feeling better about anyway. They have found me disabled. There's a lawyer, a veterans lawyer in Colorado. He's a veteran himself. That there's still a claim open and pending right now that seems to be going in the direction that may benefit me. At least I hope it does. But I'm learning not to have expectations. So that was one of my goals, is to get health care, which I'm getting now, and I'm grateful for that. And like I say, in addition to that, I'm disabled. I'm 70% disabled. What this lawyer in Colorado is doing is he's trying to get that number higher, so I have a little more income in terms. Well, you can't claim it as income, of course. VA compensation is tax free because it's due to your service connected disabilities, which mine are all mental, with the top one being PTSD. But on a side note, something that I don't think I've mentioned often on here anyway, um, my discharge from the military was OTH, other than honorable. And I think that we went over that in our last podcast. And it was less than a year ago, I guess, thinking back in hindsight, but roughly in the last 9 months, that I wanted to see what I could try to get a veteran status from the government, not from the VA, but from the DOD, the Department of Defense. Because although the VA has recognized my service as honorable, which I'm grateful for, in the DOD's eyes and the government eyes, I'm still not a veteran because of my other than honorable discharge. But the thing to remember is my other than honorable was not punitive, meaning I didn't go to a court martial, I didn't get arrested. Mine was administrative because I used drugs towards the end of my enlistment, which they kicked me out for. And it was against the law. I mean, I knew the rules, but I found myself doing the illicit substances to try to cope from, just my sleep patterns and having bad dreams and stuff along those lines.
And
So
what drug was it that you were positive for in the Navy? I forget.
it was marijuana. I was using marijuana and of course alcohol. As long as we were in port tied off, I was getting, and off work, I was getting liquored up somewhere.
Okay.
Um, more so than what I had been in the past. I found myself drinking at every chance I had. Um, and I did, at the time, you do that thinking, well, it's just because the guys are out doing it. We're out having a good time. We've been out to sea a while. We deserve this type of thing. That it definitely becomes habitual. It's a habit. And I found a little more, like Steven mentioned earlier with his drug of choice, I found more well-being with marijuana. Um, and that's what ultimately I tested positive for, and they discharged me for. And like I say, though, my discharge was completely administrative, meaning they said, okay, you use marijuana, you knew it was against the rules. And instead of kicking me out, I was kind of fired, I guess you'd say, from the military. But unfortunately, what that led to throughout my life is zero acknowledgement, benefits, anything pertaining to the government. So I couldn't get I've not been able to get a government job, federal nor state. No sort of veteran benefits, like they have, like say at Home Depot, 10% off, or in the state of Missouri, there's a property tax benefit for disabled veterans on their property tax. So those things I've not been eligible for due to my discharge. But I've not let that bother me because I knew that what I did at the time was wrong. But what happened, separate, completely separate legal issue from my disability with the VA, is that there's a group of lawyers in DC through the DAV, which is the Disabled American Veterans, group that offers pro bono legal counseling for taking someone, and they only take other than honorable discharges of that type of work, and they go and they do the work for you, and then they go present it before the Naval Board of Corrections and see about getting your discharge going from other than honorable up. So they looked at my case initially. They were emailing back and forth, waiting on my military record. They finally got all of that. And they said that they would review everything that was going on and get back to me within 5 to 8 months. At first, I really didn't know what my chances would be. But as I got to doing my own homework, there were a couple of things specifically that stood out to me that gave me hope, thinking that I can get it upgraded. Those couple of things are, one is called the Wilkie memo. The other one's called the Curdy memo. And what those are is those two memos basically go about it saying that from a legal perspective, now in today's society with the rules and they recognize PTSD and don't ask, don't tell, or things that they work with in the military now where they didn't in the past. It kind of gave me hope. And I thought, okay, cool. Well, I had never personally spoke to anyone from this organization in DC. We didn't have any verbal correspondence at all. But going strictly off of my military record and my VA treatment records within the last year, they called me last Friday. It was a week ago yesterday. They called me. I was at an outpatient and I stepped outside. I took the call in a quiet room. And I thought, wow, this is positive news. They're calling me. So there was a lady on the other end of the phone. And we were on the phone for probably 20, 25 minutes total. But what she told me in the first 5 minutes was that they decided not to help me with my case. And I was kind of taken aback by that, thinking, okay, just off of looking at what she has in front of her, that they're not going to take my case, that she gave the reasons. And one of them was because she says, I've got 500 pages of your medical record here from VA from the last year, and each one of them speaks of methamphetamine. She said, in front of the Naval Board, marijuana and alcohol, they have a certain amount of clemency for, so to speak. But she said for the more illicit drugs like cocaine, methamphetamine, heroin, yada yada yada, that they don't really see those as things that you can overcome, you know. And so I said to her, I said, you know, I can understand your mindset because I used to be there myself. But now, after being in recovery, especially almost these last 6 months, I've learned that it doesn't matter what the substance is. Alcohol, which is legal, pills, which can be legal, or street drugs, which are illegal. They're all addiction, every single one of them. And so I told her, I said, I didn't do methamphetamine throughout my whole life. And so then she said, it also shows here, you know, I don't really see where you've done anything productive with your life. And I said, no one from your agency has ever called me and asked me. You guys haven't asked for any information about my life after the military, post-military. I said, I was a civilian merchant marine officer for 20 plus years. Didn't get in any trouble, paid my taxes, raised my child, never a violent man, no legal issues. I said, I was a good citizen, you know, and I did something with my life. And then I explained to her, I said, when I became addicted to methamphetamine, now as all this information has came out, it was determined that it's because of my service condition, my service connected condition, that I began methamphetamine so I wouldn't go to sleep, so I wouldn't have these nightmares. I said, I didn't do that throughout my whole life. I did that for the last 5 years since I resigned. And I told her I resigned due to public safety because I knew I was addicted and I didn't want to take a chance of getting anyone hurt. And I held a federal license, you know, issued to me by the United States Coast Guard. And she seemed a little shocked at first. She's like, oh, I didn't know that. And I said, yeah. I said, I didn't get out of the military and start methamphetamine and just go down a trail of being addicted the rest of my life. I said, I got out of the military, saw my physician that I had seen as a boy. We talked about a few things. He gave me sleeping pills to begin with when I was in my early 20s, and this and that, tweaked the medicine over the years. And I wound up being on legal pharmaceuticals. And on my days off, I would drink alcohol. But I said, I didn't do anything illegal during those years. The illegal methamphetamine began due to my service-connected disability. And so what she said is, all I can do, sir, is advise you that, you know, you need to write this down. You need to document your story. And I will send you the required forms that you would need to go forward on your own to ask for clemency from the board. And I told her, I said, I'm not going to ask for clemency from anyone because although what I did was wrong in the Navy, the end result was there's 4 people alive from that helicopter crash that I feel like I had a part of. So I wouldn't change a thing. I mean, I can't change a thing. I can't go back in time to begin with, but would I change that? No, because I feel like I had a part in that. And if that still meant that today I would get another than honorable, then that's what I would get because I do it all over the same way.
Now, if I may on that point,
Sure.
It has been a curiosity to me. Everybody did survive. We lost some equipment. The United States government lost some equipment. What was the potential reality of loss of life what has lingered for you for all these years?
Yeah. For myself on the flight deck initially when it happened, for the guy that was on each side, they call them chalk and chainmen, for their lives. I mean, as closely as that tail rotor came by our faces, yeah, man, that's something that, I mean, seeing how it hit the guard shack on the second go around when the bird was spinning, of what can be done to that. That's when I went to the hangar bay. But then to watch that bird on the flight deck, I mean, this however many pounds that they weigh structure of a helicopter bouncing and then ultimately doing a somersault into the sea, the 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 possibility was certainly great. And then the four guys, one of them were there was an injury there with Lieutenant Verducci. You know, he had he had he had blood coming out of his orifices, but he did survive. So they all survived, but the potential loss of life, the four guys in the bird and the three guys on the deck, including myself, that was seven people that potentially one of us could have died that day or more very easily. And for whatever reason, I'm not a spiritual man yet, but for whatever reason, we did survive. And so that's why I told that lady last week, I said, I wouldn't change a thing. I mean, I can, and she says, well, that my story that she said that they didn't have any knowledge of. She said that is pretty powerful. You know, you can still on your own try to get your discharge upgraded, especially once you get more clean time. And if you write and explain why you started methamphetamine and the career that you had post military, she said those things would be good to show to the board. But she says, I'm sorry, we still are not going to accept your case for now. And I guess that's really brought me down in the dumps, man, this last week, because I guess I had expectations, Tim. I thought in my mind and in my heart that things would have gone in the way that would benefit me. And she asked me, why do you want an honorable discharge? I said, I'll tell you why. It's just so I can be recognized as a veteran. I said, it has nothing to do with the property tax discounts or the 10% at Home Depot. I said, I still wear a veteran hat, veteran shirt proudly because I still consider myself a veteran. But I said, I just want to be recognized, one in the government's eyes. I've already got a burial that I can get in a national cemetery and all those things. I'm not doing it for the accolades. I'm doing it so I can get a goddamn veteran card that says that I served this country. Because right now I can't. And I don't think that that's fair. You know, I understand where I did break the law while I was in smoking marijuana. I understand that. But now with these two memos that specifically say, if you have an other than honorable that wasn't punitive due to PTSD, being a gay person, or military sexual trauma, come forward and try to get your discharge upgraded. I think I had a very plausible or possible outcome that would have benefited me just for that status alone. I don't give a shit about the benefits that maybe come with it. I'm getting benefits now, the health benefits. It's just my pride, man. I'm proud of what I did, and I'm proud to have served this country. And I did it with documentation that I still have that shows my evaluations for the first 3 years, my good conduct medal, my expeditionary medal, my Navy Achievement Medal for helping to save those guys that day. Those things mean something to me. But it would also be very nice to be able to say, yeah, I'm a veteran and I can show it, something tangible. I don't have that, man. It's like in recovery right now, Tim. Every month, every 60, every 90 days, 120 and 180, there's a coin and a key tag from some organizations for like a simple, small, tangible reward that you've done something to get to that point. And whenever I want to use, and I'm by myself, let's say, for a moment driving or whatever that might be, and I get cravings, that's something I can hold, man, and rub between my fingers and say, I've worked too goddamn hard for this to use right now. I'd like to have the same thing being a veteran. I'd like to have a card that would say, yeah, I am a veteran. I did the right thing at the right time for the right reasons, and then I can rub and hold. That's all I want. That might sound stupid and menial to some people, but it means something to me. It means something to me that I can say I'm a veteran and be one in the government size, not just the VA. So that's what bothers me right now. And I'll tell you, I've been really down in the dumps because of it. It's bothering me, man. And it makes me feel like, okay, I used to have all these different goals in life and I reached most of them. I've always had the golden ring as my goal, so to speak, and I've reached most of those in my life. I've done most of what I've wanted to do or a version of it. I've traveled, I've done adventures I wanted to do, I've raised my son the way I wanted to do. Now, my only goals were really to get right within the government's eyes, then I feel like that goal is kind of, it's done now. And so then I say to myself, okay, I'm sitting here and I'm getting clean, which is not easy to stay clean. You can get clean, that's no problem. Staying clean is not easy, man. And I think, why am I suffering and not doing drugs to numb myself? Why am I not starting to do something here with drugs to make myself feel better that I know I could for a while, temporarily, and suffer when in the end of this, what is left for me? My kid's grown and gone. He's married. I haven't seen him in 3 months. I have no one in life to call my partner, no significant other, a woman. And I'm almost 50. I'm unable to work at this point in time due to physical and mental issues. I go about 4, 5, 6 hours at the most before I'm so fatigued that I have to sleep. I slept yesterday when I got home around 2, I think I laid down. I got up at 4:30, went back to bed at 7, and I slept until this morning. That's all I do is sleep and go to recovery meetings, sleep, go to recovery meetings. And I'm okay with that. But then I ask myself, what am I going to do after that? After they say, oh, hey, you're well enough that you can drop down on your level of treatment, what do I do? What is my fucking purpose? Especially now that I feel like a couple of the goals that I had in life are, you know, why am I suffering and staying clean? That's where I am right now. I'm not saying that it won't get better. I'm not saying that it can't get better, but that is my mindset right now is I'm in a very low place mentally. And I have been since I got that fucking news, and I've not been participating in class the way that I once did. Usually I'm the first guy to get up to the podium and speak in front of the group. I didn't do that once last week because,
you might be getting stuck right now, and you just gotta.
yeah, maybe I'm just stuck in a low spot. But
Well,
I figured that the only way for me to get better, if I'm going, is just to keep doing what I'm doing, because I know as long as I'm in this housing, as long as I know I'm with Steve, as long as I know I'm in the groups every outpatient, as long as I know I'm in the rooms of recovery outside of this housing, and if I got Steve to go with me to the store and stuff that I'm not using, that's the only thing I tell myself right now is just keep pushing forward, even though I feel like shit. Does that make sense?
well, it does. And we had this discussion via text, I think, during the week. And my response to you was, don't forget, you didn't get sober to get your other than honorable upgraded.
That's true. I got sober to start getting medical care and not be stigmatized against. And I'm getting that now. But I'm saying to myself now, okay, I'm getting this treatment medically. I still have more. I got another MRI scheduled, and they're trying to find out what's wrong with my torso and these pains. But then after that, what? I have such anhedonia. I don't know if you know what that is, but it's so strong, especially from a crystal methamphetamine abuser, more so. And I'm not taking anything away from folks that drink or do heroin, but it's scientific at this point that it's proven from these neuroscientists that our dopamine levels on a regular day is right around 50 nanograms. If we're doing something really pleasurable, like say eating dinner, having sex, it can go up to 80 or 100. But that's it. That's your body's natural dopamine levels. That when you drink alcohol, you do heroin, opiates, cocaine, that goes up to like 600, right? 600 nanograms. Crystal methamphetamine is 1100. It's like dumping your whole dopamine system out whenever you use meth. It takes your whole 5 gallon bucket that you have and dumps it out. And what starts to happen, I've learned, as a survival mechanism, your body and your brain, if you're a meth user, it stops producing these and it stops allowing the transmitters, right? And I'm not saying this to say, woe is me. I did it myself. But what I am saying is to do that chronically for 5 solid years, day by day by day, it really damages and does, I'm not going to say irreversible damage to your brain, but it takes much longer for your brain to be able to rewire itself and start to feel pleasure in anything. I mean, and that's called anhedonia. You know, I'll say this and then I'll shut my pie hole for a second and let you guys discuss. But I think that my therapist, Dan, explained it the best to me. He said, Charlie, methamphetamine is completely different than all other substances in this matter. He says, I have several people I've worked with who have gotten clean off of heroin, other substances, alcohol. And he says, after about 6 months, you ask them, hey, how you doing? And he says, and they'll say, hey, things are getting better. You know, it's still rough, but things are getting better. He said, with methamphetamine patients, he says sometimes a year, even a year and a half later, they still feel like shit. Not so much in feeling like shit that you have an inability to feel pleasure. You don't want to do anything. And I used to be the guy that wants to go to an art museum. I used to be the guy that wanted to go to a concert, a jazz show, or to go motorcycle riding or to do anything. Now, all I want to do is just sleep because nothing brings me pleasure except for sitting here bullshitting with you two right now. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at in my brain chemistry, I guess. Maybe I just got to give my brain time to heal. That's what the psychiatrist said yesterday. Is she said, Charlie, you use methamphetamine for so long, it's going to take a while for your brain to be able to get the dopamine levels back to where they should, to where you feel anything that feels good in life. And I'm starting to
Well,
believe that, man.
I did mention, did you have something, Stephen?
Well, yeah, I was just let me dive into that. Yeah, I mean, speaking from what I see for Charlie, you know, he's at this level right now where we all, as addicts or alcoholics, definitely speaking for myself, you know, you get stuck. You feel like you're at one point, and you just feel like maybe your legs are in wet concrete. You can't move. It's just something, you know, in recovery, you just
That's a
gotta
good analogy.
you've
Yeah.
got to, you know, change your people, places, and things, your old habits, hobbies. You have got to, you know, find something, go outside, you know, like, you know, I'm trying to get you to go outside. Let's go walk for maybe an hour if possible. You know, for me, getting out, you know, I have this like thing, you know, I'm a redhead, so we're pale. I like to get outside, man. Especially in the summertime over the last, you know, here in sobriety, I want to get outside. If I get sunburned, so far I haven't peeled, but I've gotten burned. But I'm just, you know, trying to get outside, get sun on me, get that vitamin D going, and you know, just trying to find other hobbies and stuff. But you know, once you feel stuck, that's where you know you got to check your inner self. You know, to reach out, talk. Definitely don't isolate. That's the big thing. But you know, just listen to other people's
Which,
stuff.
you know, why that's another good reason why I figure, even though I feel like shit right now between the years, the best thing for me to do is to be here because it's kind of like when Charlie was growing up, you know, at the house, there would be times where he would be in another room, say practicing his bass or doing his homework, right? To where we weren't really actually communicating, but just knowing that he was there, I felt a connection that even though I sleep a lot or whatever, I'm glad to know Steven's here because if I was at home right now, I'd be alone, if that makes sense, you know. So even though I might be, say, sleeping or I don't enjoy doing a lot of things, just to know that I'm here in housing with someone, it does help me, I think, in a certain way, even if he's watching sports and if I'm laying down or if I'm on my way home, for example, from outpatient, and I know Steve has been here. Let's say while I've been gone, he goes to a meeting, comes back. It's almost like, hey, honey, I'm home because at least I know I've got someone to come home to. that helps me as well, you know. So I figure it's just something that's going to happen, that I got to give it time. And when this slump is over, that's not to say I won't get another one. I guess this is just dealing with life on life's terms right now, for, you know.
Well, and you have mentioned that
Yeah, I go through that too.
the the
Go
the
ahead.
the 6 month mark is kind of where it starts getting tough for those in recovery. What is your experience there, Stephen?
Yeah, I want to say this definitely is the longest for me. I've hit a year a couple times, and for me personally, a year, a good 12 to another 12 to 30 days. That's for me. That's when I felt like, okay, my body's starting to recognize, this is normality. Getting up early. A lot of people I've talked to here in housing. You're up at 6. Why?
Well,
Well,
why not?
yeah, I can't. I want to get up, get something to eat. I need to get back into lifting weights. That's something I miss. But here, being 53 years old, I definitely feel my age. Sometimes I feel like I'm 153, if that makes sense. But getting up early, getting an early start, plus, going to bed around 9. We had we were in a 4-man apartment. We had one younger individual who was playing video games till 4 o'clock in the morning. And I don't understand that, but, my kids, going back to my kids, they're gamers and they do that. And it really upsets me, but I just need to get up and get going. And, if I'm not going to a meeting, going to behavioral wellness, trying to get a hold of my sponsor, talk to him, and communicating with other people at the house. If you come out to the back of the house here, you can sit out in the sun, and it's pretty nice. And I try to do that, and try to find something positive to do to get me going through the day. Like Charlie said, sometimes you feel like, you're stuck, and all there is to do is maybe lay down and sleep for 2 to 3 hours, get up, eat, go to a meeting. I guess you maybe, if you don't mind me saying, maybe you're at that point where this is just becoming, repetitious,
Well, that, and then also in my mind, part of it is, I think, because I say, okay, now that I'm getting, the fog is lifting, my mind's getting clearer, I'm finally getting health treatment. What now? Like, I'm going to speak on Friday coming up. I'm going to go back to inpatient, where he and I were inpatient at the main facility out in the country. I'm going to go there and speak for 2 hours. One for a group about promoting housing. Another one is a men's empowerment group that is ran by one of the guys down in inpatient that I love a lot. His name's Dylan, and he asked me. I was honored. I said, sure, I'd love to speak there. So I'm going to do that next Friday. That kind of gives me, it not only gives me, I guess, a little bit of that dopamine rush, but I also know that if I stay clean until next Friday, that's something that I can do. You know, it gives me a little incentive. Like the first time I ever went down there to speak, you have to have 90 days of sobriety in order to do that. So once I hit my 90-day mark, I was like, I want to go. So these little things like that are like the CEO of Sauna Lake, great guy. He's got a thing that he just started just this year, that every quarter, whoever has 1 year of continuous clean sobriety from Sauna Lake, that he invites you to a steak dinner, So that gives you incentive to get to that 1 year mark.
He hasn't invited me.
Well, it's a thing that they run on Facebook, and neither of us have Facebook, but I heard it through Erica. So yeah, she can put you on the list. I'll let her know, man.
Yeah, I've never done Facebook. I've always thought it was creepy. I don't know.
But I mean, those little things like that give a guy or a gal incentive to stay clean, that you think, okay, yeah, I want to get to that mark. But then I think to myself still, okay, steak dinner, speaking down in the inpatient facility. Other than that, what do I have? I'm kind of stuck in that what's next? If I look too far out in the future, I get overwhelmed. I think about the fact that I'm going to sell my house. I haven't even started packing yet. I'm supposed to get a service dog, but I'm not ready yet until I find out what's going on with my back from the MRI. That I say, even then, what am I going to do? Okay, I'm going to get my own place, have a service dog, and then what? I don't feel like doing shit every day.
Well, you
I
mentioned,
don't feel like
of course, Charlie Jr. CK2 has been a highlight of your life, and it was a big part of your recovery, weekly visits, and all that stuff. You said you haven't seen him in 3 months. Why?
I guess, he started a new job in
Hmm.
January, and this job takes him away. So, to my understanding, here lately, he's been in Tennessee every week, and I guess he comes back home once a week, sees his wife, and I've asked him for his address, never gotten it. I've called sometimes he don't return my call, and I just figure he's busy.
Okay.
But it does kind of make me wonder. He doesn't live that far away enough, and I'm driving now. Why not? I can understand where if my son is off just one day out of the week where he doesn't want to drive, I could get that. But why not let me come over and visit just for an hour? And I get no response on things of that nature. So,
Hmm.
but I'm trying not to think anything negative about it. I'm just trying to just assume as his dad that he's got life going on, but I feel like that there's other things going on that dad doesn't know about, unfortunately, you know, because 3 months and to openly say, hey, buddy, I'm driving again. Anytime you want me to come over and visit, I'll come over on a Sunday. To not get any response, I feel like there's other things that are going on that are more important than seeing me.
Well, how was breakfast with Stacy?
Great. We went twice. The first time she picked me up here at housing, and it was a snowy day. I remember that because there was still ice outside. I had been here maybe 2 weeks at that point. I wasn't really driving yet, and she took me out to breakfast, brought me back. The second time, I actually met her and picked her up to go to breakfast because she went to my house with me to get a few things. I'm not comfortable going to my house alone. And she went there to get a few things with me, and I took her to breakfast. And then that time I treated, and actually it worked out great because it was on a Saturday. And on that day, there was an event going on at Outpatient where I go 5 days a week that wasn't required, but it was something I was going to, and I wanted to go. That was really close to Stacy's. And I asked her, I said, rather than me driving all the way back to the city just to take a 2 hour nap and then drive back, can I crash at your place for a little bit? And she said, sure. She had a spare bedroom. And because I was worn out by that point. It was like noon, 1 o'clock, and I didn't need to be at outpatient till like 5:30 or 6. And it was great because, like I mentioned earlier in the podcast, man, my fatigue is at the point where I can go about 4, 5, 6 hours, and then I gotta lay down, man, or else I'm just not worth a shit. That she let me stay in her guest bedroom, and I went to sleep, slept like a baby, and then got up and went from there to my event. So seeing her has been great. Her and I, despite the fact we we are divorced, we've remained friends throughout the years. We've had a couple of disagreements like anyone would in life, but for the most part, we've been able to get along, especially for our son's benefit. And now in recovery, for her just to accept me where I'm at and what I'm doing, I've appreciated. There was a point where it was a little rough because she kind of, like Stephen mentioned earlier, she kind of had the Nancy Reagan thought of back in the early 80s of, why don't you just quit? Just say no. Well, it's not that easy. And she kind of had that mindset. But I think now that she's seeing, I guess you'd say maybe the work I've went through, maybe the battles that I've faced, if you want to use battles, that word, that she understands now why I'm in housing, why I'm doing the things that I'm doing. because mentally I still have plenty of issues I'm trying to work out. And some of them are things that, and I'm sure Steven might be able to piggyback off of this, but there's things I'm finding in recovery that past experiences, whether it be in my youth or even in, my 20s and 30s, that I thought were normal. I thought, oh, this is just how people do things. That I'm finding out now, they're not so normal, so to speak. I mean, who is normal? But what I'm getting at are things that were unhealthy for me mentally that I didn't know. I just looked at it as life. Oh, another day at the office of doing this, or, oh, that's how my childhood was. And that was normal, when I'm learning that that wasn't very healthy. And those are things I'm working out now that are going to continue for a while. It's going to take a while, because some of those things that you assume out of ignorance are healthy, that they aren't. And they do, I'm not going to say long-term damage, but it takes a while to figure out what they are, to process them so you can get rid of them. Because our brains store a whole lot of shit, man, I'm finding out, in your body itself physically. I'm learning about the brain gut barrier, as they call it, in your, what they say, your gut feeling. There is an actual scientific, there's breakthroughs and studies now of how that stuff in your body and how your body reacts, diseases that a person gets, diabetes, cancer, high blood pressure, all these different things that can be associated with different things in the past that you don't really realize that's why they're there. Some weird shit to me, man. I mean, I didn't believe any of it at first, but now with scientific things that I'm watching, instead of opinions, getting factual things from like these neuroscientists and from the rooms of recovery, I'm thinking, well, maybe I should start believing it, because it's science, and I'm kind of a logic based person.
Yes, you are.
Yeah, I'm not much on the spirituality stuff and believing in something that's not there. So with the proof that I'm currently getting, it's making me understand it better. And it's making me start to accept myself of where I am. Because that's been a huge problem too, Timmy, is I've been really nice and kind to a lot of people in my life, because there's no reason to being ugly to someone, but I'm not very kind and nice to myself. I'm not really at a point yet where I love myself. And
You should, man, because you're a very grateful person, man. You've got a good
yeah, so I'm just trying to
yeah.
work on that. I mean, like Steven said, he's working on trying to change his mindset of cynicism. I'm trying to change my mindset on that I'm a good person. I can love everyone else, it seems like, but I don't love myself, if that makes sense. So that's something I got to work on. That's a character defect, as they call it, character defect type of thing, where I don't trust most folks and I don't love myself. So those are things I've got to work on.
Well, I wrote down a question earlier when Stephen was talking about I guess, the fall into homelessness and criminality. Uh, when we first met, I think you were in the thick of it in self-isolation, getting, a friend bringing you groceries weekly or whatever it was, and things like that. Do you think that the self-isolation was to protect yourself from the negative opinions or the stereotypical addict?
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of it was because I knew as long as I was in my house, not going anywhere, and I'm learning now that was way unhealthy. It's not good for you. But I am learning also that I did that because that was safe. I was safe in my little bubble. I had my shields up. But being isolated is not a healthy way of dealing with those things, I guess. And yeah, that's why I isolated, because I was afraid of what people in public would think about the way that my body, because I should mention also, you probably already know, but lack of dopamine, or dopamine that's been unregulated and thrown about, it also causes movement disorders. Because, like, for example, Parkinson's, there are meth patients that they're using as, I guess you'd say, trial things for medicine for Parkinson's patients, because that's what Parkinson's is. It is a loss of dopamine that begins to happen, and people have body movements that are uncontrollable. So, reasons for like that, I was afraid to go out in public because of what people would say. Um, and then also, my mindset was, okay, they're going to know that I'm an addict. They're going to probably see that physically I'm weak. And then I don't know what their intentions are. Like, if they're going to try to hurt me and take my wallet or things like that, what is that stranger's intention? And to not know that was something that scared me, and then the medical thing really started because I was still trying to get myself well. But when you go to a medical doctor and they tell you, hey, you're just a drug addict, go back home. It's just the drugs. Oh, it's just the methamphetamine. There's nothing wrong with you. And you physically still feel like shit and your heart is hurting, type of thing. And they push you away. Then it made me say to myself, yeah, I need to stay isolated because this is safe. And I know that I'm not going to get hurt in my own home. And Miss Margie going to do my groceries for me. By the time, when she first started getting groceries for me, I would go out to her car when she got there and I would start humping bags back to my house, like any guy should do. The last 2 or 3 times that she did while I was waiting to get into recovery, I was unable, man. I would go out to her trunk physically due to, like I say, the movement disorder thing and these cramps. I would get like a couple of bags and go back inside and physically be so, I guess you'd say, unable due to my heart and everything else. I would sit in a recliner and she would unload everything for me because I couldn't. I got physically to the point where I couldn't do any of that. And although I know, and I'm assuming that methamphetamine had a huge role in that, and whatever it was exasperated that now that I'm clean and sober, that there are still some after effects, or I guess you'd say negative consequences that I'm dealing with because of my methamphetamine use. However, there's other things going on that are very legitimate that I'm glad that they're finally running tests on that I can't explain. They can't either. I've looked up some of the presumptives for disability, considering where I was when I was. And they're coming up with all kinds of things of like fibromyalgia. I've got a scarred lung on my left side. Like, where did that come from? Type of thing. Nodules on my liver, things of that nature that are disabling to a point that now that I'm clean, but that was the reason why I got clean.
Yeah, I've got some effects to me. I've been diagnosed 3rd stage cirrhosis, and I've got Hep C from IV use. I think there's some medication. I was taking it. I'm just gonna let it ride. You know, uh, like Forrest said, I'm just living in the moment. Um,
Well, and like, unfortunately, like I mentioned, I think it was last month that they saw in this x-ray where I have a tortuous aorta, right? Well, I guess an x-ray is not the best imaging for that they need to do an MRI. They haven't scheduled an MRI on my heart. They got one scheduled for my back, but not for my chest. And from what I'm told is tortuous aorta could be one of a combination of things, is that it can have a kink in it, which is not bad. You can, go to physical therapy and get recovered and you'll be okay. The other is dilation. If it's dilated, that's not real good, because what that means is that the vessels walls of that aorta are dilated from hypertension, from blood pressure, and it makes them thinner because they're stretched out, that it increases your chance of aneurysm and or dissection. Well, I don't know which one it is. They haven't ran any MRIs on it yet. But what Stephen was just saying about like his cirrhosis and Hep C of maybe falling off the meds or whatever, just letting Mother Nature take its course, is the way I feel. If they tell me that my aorta is something that they got to cut me open and work on, no, no, no. I'll let Mother Nature run its course. I have no desire for them to open up my chest just so I can live another 10 years. I'd rather just live another 2 years, let Mother Nature take its course, because up in my head, I'm like, why? Why do I want to live another fucking 10 years? I don't. You know, if I were to go to bed and not wake up, I'd be happy. That's my mindset lately. And it's a sad one, but that's my reality. You know, for me, why do I want to live another 15, 20, 25 years? I don't, man. I don't want to live another 25 fucking minutes. I'm tired. I'm tired of life. That's just how I feel.
Well, like, you know, in recovery, that's just something like hobbies, some interests, you know, like your woodwork you got in your basement, right?
Yeah.
You miss that, don't you? Yeah, like I said, I miss my kids. I'm neither suicidal or homicidal, but there's times I've said that, and I've over the years, and I don't blame them. I've been basically told to kill myself, which was a few times I tried and unsuccessfully. But you know, I'm trying to make amends and do things right, and you know, just finding new hobbies, new outlooks on life. You know, the past is the past. You cannot change the past. You know, making
Well,
amends.
it's finding things to give you hope or give you purpose. I didn't write it down earlier, Charlie, but have you read the book A Purpose-Driven Life?
No.
You might take a look at it at some point if you are so compelled. But um, you seem to enjoy the opportunities to speak in front of audiences of your peers.
Yeah,
Um,
that kind of for some reason that gets my motor running.
well, tell me about those experiences. Is it you speaking for an hour? Is there a question answer? Is there, but what's the event?
All of the above. So usually what I'm finding is I'll speak for about 30 to 40 minutes. And then afterwards, there's like a Q&A session. And when I do that, my hopes are to reach someone in those seats, right? And inspire them to get clean and to stay clean. But in reality, it's for me. I know that sounds selfish, but that makes me feel better to spread my story. And it's not really in a self-centered way or like being selfish. It's because for some reason I find that therapeutic. I don't know if that makes sense or not.
Yeah.
You know, that I hope I reach someone in those rooms, but if I don't, it still makes me feel good. And what they say in recovery is to, you know, give away. If you don't give away what you have, type of thing. So me giving it away, giving my story for whatever reason, seems to help me. Um, I hope it helps others. And I've had others, like there was a gal here in housing. Matter of fact, she lived here in this apartment that she mentioned to me about 2, 3, 4 weeks ago that she said, when I saw you speak down at inpatient and you mentioned housing, she said, that inspired me to come to housing. I said, really? I was honored. So I guess maybe my word did touch someone. But like I say, at the end of it, when I get done, I feel like it's really done something for me too, because I'm giving away something so I can keep it, if that makes sense.
It's also, I think, finding a new purpose. You know, as a deckhand, it was going to be I'm going to be a mate. As a mate, it's okay. I'm going to be a steersman. It's a steersman. You know, pilot. You know what I mean? It was you had a purpose with a
A
path,
goal pattern kind of.
right? I think that was great for you personally, just like the military. I think you did enjoy your time in the military until that one specific incident. Um, but how often are you getting to
Yeah, and I
speak?
excelled. I excelled in that. And something I've looked up. It was my homework from my counselor last week. He's also in recovery. Um, been clean for I think 15 years. Anyway, that he told me that due to him hearing about me speaking and whatnot, he said, I want you to, for your homework for this week, go online and see what the current criteria is to get your peer specialist credentials. He said, because if you were to get that, once you have it, you can go to treatment centers and, work part-time or whatever. It opens up a couple of doors. And then from there, after so many hours of doing that, then you can get what they call it's through the state of Missouri anyway. It's mo.gov, and their credentials to where you can become a substance abuse counselor without a college degree type of thing. That they want people, I guess, who are in active recovery to do these jobs, because some folks with that college degree that haven't been addicted, they bring a different angle to it, that they want people that have been addicted. So I did that as homework last week, and I guess that would give me something to do with my time.
Does that opportunity excite or inspire you?
Right now, no, but I'm still pushing forward.
Sure.
Like they say, like, oh, well, I fell back, and meaning fell back is like sometimes a relapse or whatever. I try to think of myself that if I'm going to fall, I want to fall forward, meaning I'm in a slump, but I'm not looking back behind me wanting to use. I'm just trying to keep my eye on the ball of recovery. And I figure as long as I do that, and I might have already mentioned this, but there's a speaker here in St. Louis, well known, and I'm part of that home group. I can't say the organization really, but he said something to me that really meant a lot. And I think I mentioned this last podcast of what I'm doing, even though I'm in this mental slump, is he said, there's two worlds. There's the regular world, the outside world, and then the world of recovery. He says, you cannot live in the outside world and visit recovery and expect to be successful at it. He said, you have to live in recovery and visit the outside world, where your recovery comes first, above your kids, above your wife, above your dog, above your job. Because if you're not in recovery doing those things to get well, then you're no good to anyone in the outside world, such as your wife, your kids, your dog, and your job. And that made sense to me. So that's why even now that I'm feeling shitty and I'm not looking up lately, at least I'm staying in a world of recovery. I'm not thinking about leaving housing. I'm not thinking about going to a lower level of treatment, because I still need these things. I know I'm not ready yet. There was a story last week of a couple guys in group that said, yeah, man, I was rummaging through my couch and I found a couple of full small bottles of Fireball or Jack Daniels. And I had the strength that I opened them up and poured them down the sink. And I said, man, I'm going to be honest with you. You're better than me, because I would have drank them some bitches right now. I mean, if I were to go to my house right now, hypothetically, and come across some little bit of methamphetamine I still had left, at this point, I'm not strong enough in my recovery. I would probably use it. But I know that I'm self-aware of it. So that's why I'm not exposing myself to certain things yet. Like to be able to go to like an Applebee's where they serve like booze and all, I'd rather not right now, because I know myself and I wouldn't be well yet. I'm not strong enough in my recovery yet. So I'm doing what this man said to do. His name, Harold L. We'll just call him Harold L. That he says, just live in recovery and keep doing that, and you'll be okay. That's what I'm doing, man.
Do you think a visit to an Applebee's type place with Stephen, or with a sponsor, or with, positive influences to deter you from falling back into even drinking a beer?
Not right now.
Okay.
Not right now. Not for me.
Okay.
And I know other people that have less time than me that are doing that already, but I just know I'm not there yet,
Okay. Now, Stephen, have you been able to attend any of his speaking engagements?
Not yet, no.
And were you at that comedy night that he attended or hosted?
No, I did not.
Okay.
When I first got here in housing, you're 5 days a week, Monday through Friday, pretty much from 9:30 to 12:30 to 1. I did that for about 15 months. Now, going to be behavioral wellness takes a lot out of me, because I see a lot of people that are trying to get better that are going through what I've been through. But I see also a big percentage of people that look like they're there because they're on probation.
or
You know,
because they just have to be there
they
and
have to be there.
they're
It's
just
that
wasting
or
their
it's
time.
that or jail. They're, and I hear negative stuff and I just don't like to be around it.
And not to interrupt, but like what Steven's saying also is I do believe that some folks that are forced into recovery that they can get better and they eventually want to. But there's also folks that, like Steven is mentioning, that, for example, if there's a certain group going on a certain day with a certain facilitator, where instead of being in the group, they will just outright miss the group, go into the lounge area and play games, play pool, look at their phone, do YouTube. And I think to myself, I don't think much about it, to be honest, because I think I'm just worried about myself and my own recovery. So I keep my side of the street clean, so to speak. It's not my place to tell them. But what I do think in my mind is they don't want to recover. I mean, if you're not in class, if you're not paying attention, if you're on your goddamn phone, then you don't belong here, man. Because I'm here to get well.
If you're in group, and I see the young ones, the mid-20s, late 20s, 30s, even younger than that, and you have your phone out in group, man.
That's disrespectful.
Playing Candy Crush. Get the fuck out, man. Go, leave, go to jail.
Well,
I've done it the jail way, and I'm doing it now this way.
Well,
You
just
don't want
like
to do it. You don't want to do it the jail way, man.
the which way?
Going to jail, county jail.
Oh, right. Okay.
I've never been to prison, but from what I've been told, county time is the worst time. And unfortunately, I've done 2 different stints in county. I've done over 11 months. It's not what you want to do, man.
Well, and something I think of too, Tim, is like when I was growing up as a kid, which I was in a stricter environment going to Catholic schools, but you didn't do shit like crosstalk, get up without asking the teacher to go to the bathroom. Shit like common courtesy is what I call it. That's what I call it. But for today's age and their technology with their phones, to be on your phone scrolling or whatever while there's someone speaking, I think is disrespectful, man. Get out of the room if you're going to do that, because I want to get well. And if someone's doing something like that, or they just get up and leave because they don't like what the person's saying and they're gone for an hour, well, you're not here to get better. If you want to do that, just go on home. Why are you even here? But that's my mindset. That's just Chuckology. I figure if you're assigned to be here and you're doing something disrespectful in class or not attending, why are you even here?
Yeah, to go back to that, I definitely want to catch him doing maybe I might go with you back to Denver.
Oh, to see me speak?
Yeah, definitely. And but yeah, I go twice a month to BW to see my therapist, who I like a lot, but he's not in recovery. So kind of, I don't know. I like him as a person. He's a good person, but I don't get any. I basically go because I'm in housing. So.
And it's like a requirement.
Yeah.
Well, Charlie, getting back to your career on the boats, you say, of course, both of you say, seeing those people that are attending by requirement, not to really get the help that is offered to those in your condition. Did you note that sort of disrespect toward the industry or the job or the hierarchy on the boat with people like that? Now, how did you deal with that? And the question I'm getting to is, in those groups, for those guys that are staring at their phones, is there any active consultation with them to say, hey, look, this could really be helpful to you if you would just look up?
Yeah, that's a good question. And so the facilitators, at least once a day, once every other day, before group starts, that they will say, okay, everybody, start in group, put your phones away, don't vape, no crosstalk. But then it happens anyway. And I guess due to, what's the word? Fear of confrontation or fear of, or, not wanting to, ruffle and ripple the waters, that they won't say anything. And don't get me wrong, Tim. I mean, like last week, there was one session where I was expecting a call, that I went up to the facilitator quietly and I said, "Hey, I'm going to keep my phone next to me on vibrate because I'm expecting an important call." No problem, But if you're doing that all day in class, and then on top of that, if you are blatantly leaving class and just going out to sit in the lounge and watch television, or get on the pool table or the foosball table, whatever, I look at that as a very of abusing the system, I guess, taking advantage of it, because somebody's paying for that. If you're not paying for it out of your pocket, insurance is, or somebody is. That if you don't want to be here, and this is just Chuckology, but if they were to make me a facilitator, I would I would do it very respectfully, wouldn't curse, but very directly say, if you're not going to be here in class participating, and if you have your phone on, I'm not going to mark you present. I'm gonna put you down as being absent for that day, because I think it's very disrespectful.
Is that the exception to the rule, or is that normal for those that are in attendance through the system per se?
Okay, I don't, and as far as that goes, like the facilitators, I've even heard a couple of them say what I just said, like, "Hey, if you're going to be on your phone, Mr. So and so, I'm not going to mark you present." So I don't know what winds up ultimately happening. For all I know, they aren't marked present. But my whole mindset is if you're coming here to get better and you're not attending, you're not participating, then it's going to be documented, so to speak. And after a while, your insurance, they're not going to pay for it or whatever. That, why are you here, type of thing. But like I say, man, that's just my way of thinking. It's like on the vessels, when you would get someone who, let's say, would push back against the rules you were asking about, or, "Oh man, I don't have to do this or do that." I would, kindly find it in the rule book. And I know I shouldn't be this way, but I'm more of a black and white type of guy. I don't have many gray areas. I would go by the rules on the vessel. And I know that they say in recovery that really you got to lose that mindset. It's not a black and white world. It's not a yes and no world. There are gray areas, and I'm learning that. But there's just some things that, for me, there's certain rules, policies, regulations that are in place for a reason. Either someone has gotten hurt, or the studies show that it doesn't work, that there's a reason these policies are in place. For example, I remember when they took away the chain of command on the vessels, they literally took the signs down from where it said captain, and then it would branch off, say pilot, chief engineer, and all that, down to the deckhands and the cook. That they took those off because they said it wasn't politically correct anymore. Bullshit. Someone has to be in charge that can keep that they can stay collected, they can stay calm, that they know what's going on, that they can be a leader. I'm not saying that they're above the deckhands and the cooks. I'm not saying that they're better than the deckhands or cooks. They're just someone who has more experience, that when it comes time, because that's not the type of job, Tim, like, let's say, I'm not taking anything away from like admin, but like a banker. Okay. If you make a mistake being a banker, you can rewind and say, "Oh, here's where I put the decimal before these two zeros and I shouldn't have." No problem. No one's hurt. River industry is not like that. Neither is the military. There is a reason why you do certain things the way you do them. If not, there is no rewinding back and seeing where you made a mistake. There's going to be someone injured, or, forbid, a loss of life. Someone can lose their life over that. Those rules are in place for a goddamn reason. And that's why that they need to be held to that standard. That's how I feel about the river industry. And that's how I feel about any sort of class for any sort of learning environment. If you're not here to learn, man, and to get better and to get certified or to get this, then why are you here? You're wasting your time and mine.
But from their perspective and life experience, is it not that they're not ready to face the realities of their situation? Are they, is the system failing society?
I'll let Steve answer that.
Yes.
That's as far as you want to speak on that? That's fine if it is. I'm, fully understood that this will be published
I
as it's
believe,
conveyed to
I
me.
believe, I believe not necessarily that it's failing. What I do believe is there are certain traditional things, politically correct or not, that need to be put back in place or reinstated, maybe under a different level of diplomacy, but if changed, are not going to help people in this society. And that's just my opinion. There's just certain things when it comes to laws and rules that they're here for a reason, man. They're not here to hurt people. They're not here to put people down. That they're there for a reason, put in place for a reason, for people's safety, for their well-being. So I wouldn't say that the whole system, but I would say that there's too many things in the last 20 years that have gone sideways due to political correctness. This is way on a different subject, but I'll tell you something that I mentioned last week. I didn't mention this to you yet. There's an older fellow that I know in recovery. I won't say who he is or where he is, but he's been clean 25 years, and he's older. He's like close to retirement age older. But I asked him because he knew I'm not asking this out of meanness. I'm asking this really out of sincereness. As I asked him, I said, "Hey," I said, "in 2025, today, right now, when I turn on the TV, if I see a TV with all the different categories that say black comedy, black drama, black classics, right? Black cinema, all these different black things." I said, and he's a black man, this fellow I'm telling you about. I asked him, I said, "Can you see where I consider that to be racism at this point?"
I believe it is racism.
And he said,
What'd you call it? Reverse racism?
reverse discrimination is, yeah. And what he said to me was, he said, "Charlie, I can agree." He says, "But I can also see where your forward thinking has already put you in a place that we should be, and we're not." Because was there a need for that, say, where it was helpful 25, 30 years ago? Sure. Because the civil rights movement back in the 60s and the good things that Dr. King did, I think Dr. King was a great man. I think he was someone that really just wanted equality across the board. He didn't want anyone to be treated better or less. He wanted equality. I'm all for that. Charlie's for that. But I also think that it got to a point in the 90s and in the early 2000s where what I was telling Steve is I think it's called reverse discrimination. It's where, if you're white, you're not going to get a certain job because the quota calls for a minority. If you're white, you better not put on the newspaper the white section. Or if you're white, you better not put on the news media white classic movies or white cinema. And I agree. You shouldn't put that on there, right? But I also think that now to have everything that's labeled as, say, black, I look at as racism. Why does it have to be black cinema or white cinema? Why can't they just put cinema? Why does it have to be labeled as a black drama or a black comedy? Just put it down as a comedy. Like I like Eddie Murphy as much as I do Chevy Chase, that I think in the current moment, in today's world, I look at that as racism against everyone else who's not black. That's just my feelings. I'm not saying that I think all blacks are racists or anything, but I do believe that format enables a certain amount of entitlement, let's say, that they automatically assume that a white person gets. I wasn't anywhere when they were handing out those white privilege cards that they talk about. I wasn't there, buddy. I grew up in the hood, the only white kid on my block. I got the shit knocked out of me because I was white before, because I was white. Do I hold that against the whole black community? No. Look at Sherry, my last woman. She's as black as night. I'm as white as day, but we loved each other. You know, I have no problem with that part of it. Where I have a problem is, like I say, in the last 10 years or so, let's start dropping the black and the ethnic things and come to a society that is truly together, that's equality. Because I love Dr. King, but I'll tell you, I despise like Sharpton or anyone else
There's
that
Crockett.
Jasmine Crockett. I mean, these are people that I think personally, this is my opinion only, that I think will hear news about something regarding the black community in a whole different city, and they'll fly there, create a protest, and stir the pot with something and call it racial. That I believe that they don't want equality; they want blacks above everyone else. That's how I feel watching them speak, watching their actions, because actions also speak. You know, I believe that when they show things, let's say about the KKK, I think the same thing. That is wrong, man. That they shouldn't be hurting black folks. I mean, that is completely wrong. But I also think it's wrong for Black Lives Matter to know that now, how many years have passed? I think 10 years have passed since they formed Black Lives Matter, that now they know that there's like 3 women who are living somewhere in California
Have like 4 or 5 houses.
it's worth millions of dollars that they got from proceeds from Black Lives Matter.
The ones that, the founders, it's
so the money didn't wind up going for a good cause. It wound up going to get in someone's pocket. Okay, fine. That's history. Let's move on. All lives matter. Black, white, cops, everybody's lives matter. So that's something that for me, on a personal note, that I just find it within this country. You were asking earlier, do I think that the system is failing us? I just think that the system needs to be tweaked a little bit and go back to equality, go back to certain values. And like, for example, gays in the military, I have no problem with that. Why? Because I was in the military. And if shit hits the fan, let's say, and the guy next to you is homosexual, I don't give a shit. If he's there and he's got my back and got a rifle and he's there to help me, I'm there to help him. I don't care what their sexual orientation is. So I'm glad that they lifted that ban on homosexuals in the military, because they're people, man. Whoever they want to sleep with, that's their issue. You know, spiritually or morally, that's their issue. I don't give a damn. So things like that, I'm good for as far as advancing forward. But the things I'm not okay with are things where people are discriminated against because they aren't, let's say, black or Asian or Hispanic or whatever.
the whole DEI.
Yeah, I mean, stuff like that. I think personally allowed a certain mindset to the country and to our values that says, hey, you know what? The white guy's been wrong all along. You know, they have abused us. They abused us 150, 200 years ago with slavery. I never owned any slaves, buddy. And I don't know of anyone in today's society in 2025 that was a slave. That's over with. Was it a horrible thing? Well, sure it was. I mean, enslavement of any person or indentured servitude is fucking wrong, man. You don't hold someone against their person and tell them that they got to work 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, and they can only live in this environment with this amount of food. That's horrible. I think people ought to be able to have their own lives. They ought to be able to work for what they want, get what they've earned, and be proud of that. If you, in today's society, are any color and you scream racism over not being able to get a degree and a decent job, then you're just using that card as an excuse. Because anyone in today's society, America is a great place, man. The land of opportunity. It truly is. That I don't think anyone right now if they looked, would be discriminated against within a reputable place to be able to work and flourish within our society as a good citizen. That's just my opinion, man. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist. I'm sure in certain corners of the earth and certain corners of our own country, in smaller communities, maybe it does. But in most metropolitan cities where people are educated, they don't even have to have a formal education, just some high school. Then they should know that there are plenty of opportunities out there. And it doesn't matter what color you are, you just got to work for it. And you're not going to be given it just because you're a certain color, white or black. You shouldn't just be given something. You got to work for it. You earn it and then you get it. So I think that seeing those things bother me. And the man I was telling you about, when I asked him about it, I said, "Can you see my perspective from it?" He said, "Yeah, absolutely." He said, "But Charlie, you're a forward thinker and you're thinking of how we should be. We're not there yet within society. So, but that's just Chuckology.
Oh, right.
Chuckology 101.
How does society get to the point where you believe there's been positive change? Has there been any benefit over the years in your career, in your lives, in any way that the initiatives in DEI have been proven beneficial and good for
Sure.
society?
Okay. Well, I'll give you a great example. The river industry. Shauna Hallinan. I worked with Shauna. I know her well. One of the first that I know, anyway, of female towboat pilots. Carrying 25 or so barges. Stuff like that, equal opportunity. I'm all for it, man. Someone who, say, is a black pilot. Why not? If a person is able to do the job, and I don't care what color, what gender that they are, which God they pray to, I don't give a shit. So I think that in that aspect, DEI was helpful because it allowed certain companies, let's say, for example, to not be able to discriminate. I think that's why those rules were in place, saying, okay, you can't just not give a guy a job because he's black. You can't just not give a job to a person because they're a woman. It's equal opportunity. So for that reason, I do think DEI types of things that were put into place did their job. But I also think that it gets to a point where the whole DEI thing, it becomes a platform of abuse, of being able to, I guess you'd say, power the other way, where things, to become politically correct and all that. I remember Sherry saying to me, and just a reminder, she was my woman, and she's a black lady. Sherry saying to me what her dad said, and he was a Vietnam veteran. He passed away, but he was in Vietnam, and he came back and raised his family, 2 kids. He was married, had a wife, worked at for the airlines here in St. Louis. That when the whole African American thing came out as the proper term, that she said to her dad, said, "No, I'm just American. I'm a black man in America, but I'm American." That's how I feel. I'm not an Irish American or German American. I'm an American, dude. I was born here, raised here, fought for this country here. I might happen to be white, or I might happen to be of Irish descent or Norwegian descent, but I'm an American. So I don't really use the term African American. I don't see why I need to. I can use a descriptive nature to say, "Oh, you mean Mike, the black guy?" Sure, that's a description. It's not belittling. That's to say that there's 2 mics in the room. Oh, which mic? That's that black fellow on the left over there, hypothetically. I'm not going to say African American. Why do I need to? That's an American if they're here in my fucking front room. But that's just my take. So I think that the DEI did serve a purpose, and a good one, when it was there. But after an amount of time, especially a generation, to say from the early 2000s until now, okay, well, there's a whole new group now that has been born and raised. Let's do without those things and just call it being an American, having true equality, where people are treated equally across the board, where companies aren't allowed to discriminate and say, "Oh, I'm going to hire Steven just because he's white." No, you can't do that anymore. So I think that it served its purpose. I think that to do away with it now is the right time. I think that that's how we get to the answers is see where we have problems, create a solution, something that is respectful, that's good for humankind, put that solution in place. But then once we've recovered from that, let's move on, man. I mean, let's move on and say we're a society now of Americans who love this country, regardless of your gender or who you pray to or anybody else. That's just like folks who have said to me, "Well, man, you were over in the Gulf. You know, you must hate those ragheads," is what they call, or they call them the sand N word. And I say, no, I don't. I don't hate them. Matter of fact, part of me serving this country was that so if people of that um, religious background want to be treated fairly, that they are, that they're able to come here legally and migrate here, create a good life, and become citizens so they can pray to whomever they want. That was one of the reasons why I served. So I'm not mad at anyone that prays to Allah that's Muslim. I don't give a shit who you pray to. I just want that person to be treated with dignity while they're here as a citizen. I don't want them to be treated unfairly. I don't want someone, say, two white cops beating up on a black guy just because he's black. That's not fair. I'm glad for body cams now. As long as the cop's doing the right thing, those body cams are going to be helpful. If a cop's a dirty cop, it'll catch them. That's the way I see it. Make it to where they can't turn them son bitches even off. If they're on duty, they got on a body cam, they can't turn it off. So that way they're not doing dirty things. So that way they are upholding the law. And so people are treated fairly. So I think that these things have come to fruition, like body cams, drop of DEI, because we don't need that sort of institution anymore, you know? But
there's always going to be controversy. There's always going to be stuff thrown out there that, you know, one side's not going to like it. The other side does like it. But yeah.
you know, and like I've been asked about this whole Israeli and Palestinian thing, and my answer is always the same. I don't give a shit if it's the Jews or the Muslims. I hate seeing people lose their life.
Yeah.
Period. Women and children and men that are innocent civilians, that over a religion. I just think people should treat people with humanity. Be kind. It doesn't cost a thing. It's free. Be kind to one another. I can't stand the thought of, say, the Ukraine and Russia, both of them losing kids on each side. That's fucking horrible, man. You know, I just think, but that's utopian way of thinking, I guess, you know. Is it possible? I would like to think so, but we aren't there. But that would be my answer. Republican, conservative, I don't give a shit. You know, just treat people with kindness and agree to disagree. That's what debate is for. You know, it's not to bring up conflict and looting and rioting and burning shit. It's so that two groups of people can get together, express their views in a civil manner, sitting down like normal human beings without throwing fists and guns, and come to an agreement of some sort, or to say, hey, I disagree. However, I'm able to bend in this area to make sure that this becomes better. Sure, I'm open-minded to that. Tell me a better way, and I'm open-minded to it. But to kill someone over land, over oil,
Over a seat.
Yeah, over a seat at the damn high school stadium when a kid stabbed the other. Come on, man. His life was not threatened. But to hold his knife and say, touch me and see what happens, and then to stab the other kid, that is not reciprocal force with force.
Yeah,
he used deadly force in an area where he wasn't threatened. His life was not threatened. He was asked to leave and decided he didn't want to leave. And when the guy said, you need to leave, and he started to grab his shirt or whatever for the other guy to say, touch me and see what happens, that is instigating.
Yeah, you got to check it out. It's the Austin Metcalf, and the Anthony family in Frisco, Texas. Yeah, check it out.
You know, but that's just one example.
Yeah, yeah. But society, what I've seen from that is they're turning it racial. and there's no reason to do
Right.
that. It's bad. Like I said, the Anthony kid who stabbed that Metcalf kid, what I was saying earlier, he's out on bond at his parents' house, and it's all they got a GoFundMe, and they've got over $500,000, and the blacks are leaving after donating that much money. Each person's donating this and that, $20, $5, and they're leaving like quotes saying that white kid deserved to die, and that's just awful, man. We've been we've been slaves for this long. It's time for the white man to die, and it's just I didn't know there was that much hate still. In 2025, that much hate. It's just sad. 17-year-old, and then I've got two young kids, or now they're I had two young, they were young at 17. I couldn't imagine what I would, it wouldn't be good. I can tell you that.
I can't imagine my son, Tim, little Charlie, I can't imagine him ever being disrespectful to someone due to their skin color or their gender. He would open the door for anyone and hold it, and I'm glad I raised him to be that way. Cause just to look at someone who's different and be against them automatically just because of that skin color. I just think, what are we, 5? Come on, man, grow up, I mean, but that's, like I say, that's a whole nother topic, I guess, but that's something that I kind of look at within the country in terms of, do I think that society is failing us? And when you take it, well, we're here in St. Louis. I grew up in St. Louis. North St. Louis is, and I don't know if it is right now, but I know that for a long-term status, for years, we had the highest murder per capita, like 581% higher than the national average. Well, when you take a young person and they grow up in a neighborhood where out of, say, 20 homes on that row, only 4 are still livable, all the other ones are condemned, they aren't going to school, and they see the older kids that are, and they might be 6 or 7, they see these kids that are 15, 16, 17 carrying firearms. That's the environment that they grow up in. When they see that these kids use those firearms to shoot someone else or to get shot proudly because they aren't afraid to die, there's something wrong there, man. There's no value for human life. Why? Because they're raised at such a young age to not care about human life. Oh, yeah, just shoot them. Or, yeah, for my set or for my hood, for my money aspect, I'm ready to die. They have no value for their life nor for their neighbor. That is a very toxic environment, man. And we're not far from that where we're at here on Delmar Boulevard. I grew up just north of here, but that's the mindset there, man. I mean, you'll take 6 or 7, I say kids, I'm talking kids. I'm talking 10 to 15 years old carrying assault weapons, man, that if you show up in their neighborhood and it's a gang rival type of thing, they have no problem dying for it nor killing for it. And I think that's where society can go wrong, is when you take such a young generation, they form that mindset and then they pass it on to the next one. They pass it on to the next one. They pass it on to the next one. So is there a solution for that? I don't know. But I can tell you that I understand why the young kids are doing what they're doing, because they don't have any value for human life. Maybe they're growing up in a home without a dad or without a mother, for that matter. Let's say if the mom is strung out on drugs, unfortunately, because I've learned another thing too in recovery. There are a lot of good people in recovery or that want to get recovered that can't, because they genuinely cannot get the help. They're miserable. They're always finding a way to use, either by stealing or whatever. They become homeless, but they don't want to be that way. They want to get recovered and they can't, due to no money, no insurance, no family to help them. And they wind up dying in that environment. Unfortunately, that's what happens. But I say that because I used to be so against homeless or anyone on the street. I remember telling my son when he was growing up, I'd say, "Oh, Charlie," we'd be riding in the car and I'd say, "Man, that guy's a bum because he wants to be." or that gal is homeless because she wants to be. You know, they're pieces of shit. They're just lazy. I don't think that way now, Tim, because I've learned that those people were once like you and I, you know, just trying to make it. And sometimes they cannot get the help that they need. That's why they wind up becoming a victim to that environment.
Well, sir, I can tell you, I did not necessarily expect Stephen to join us today, and I certainly did not expect us to land on this topic, but
I didn't either.
we have eclipsed, I believe, the 3 hours recording, which is kind of the upper limit of what I'm able to edit these days.
Right.
Do you have anything else you'd like to add here today? And I'd like to thank Stephen. I'm not sure if he's sitting there near you.
Yeah. Hey, Steve, whenever you get a second, Tim's saying goodbye. He's signing off, buddy.
All right.
Yeah, he's on his way, Tim.
But yeah, was there anything else you wanted to touch on, Charlie, or have we covered as much ground as we could today?
Well, I think that we've covered a lot of ground. Of course, like you just said, I mean, a lot of the topics that they went off topic, but
Well,
I don't know, in a kind of way, I find it therapeutic, really.
Yeah, it does. It does feel good to talk about things, you know, your past and, you know, what you could have done better.
I mean, I appreciate you allowing us to do this on this platform because, I mean, we're just a couple of regular guys. I'm finding that no one on this world is special on this earth. We all are, you know, the same, equal. So yeah, I appreciate you letting us share to where maybe someone hears something about this who's struggling as an addict too. Because man, I'm finding I've been through boot camp. I've been through living with my dad, who was an asshole growing up, and being in recovery is tough. It's one of the hardest things I've ever had to do in my life. Not to get clean, but to stay clean.
Yeah, to maintain it, you know,
it's a chore, and it's something that I'm just pushing forward with every day.
Well, again, I thank you both for your time, and I hope we can do this again sometime pretty soon.
Indeed. Let me know when, buddy. Have a great day.
All right. Keep hope alive, Charlie.
You bet.
The sun will come up again. I do promise that.
Thanks. I appreciate it, Tim.
Thanks,
Be in touch, guys. No problem.
Bye.
This has been a production of Where You At Studios, LLC.